I have been muted. I have too many buttons going on at one time in my little setup here at home. Was what I was saying is a big thank you, Bhavanish, for giving us the information about the IDC
Cool.
and what you guys are actually doing. We have quite a few questions that came through. The first one, which I
Mm.
think is a very easy one, we'll give you a softball to start off with. You mentioned the ceiling and the floor of your investments, of how much you invest. You said 1 million was the floor. Is that R1 million or $1 million?
Sure. Thanks, Terence, man, and thanks for all the great questions which have come through. The floor is R1 million within South Africa. Um, Outside of South Africa, though, so like within the continent, it starts scaling up, and we start looking at a minimum of $3 million within certain African countries, and that does increase thereafter. I don't want to specify exactly what those price points are for now. Rather have a chat with us, and we can go into those details. But for SA, R1 million.
Okay, I see. And then you're speaking about the fact that you don't want someone you generally aren't looking for applicants who have no other investment or no other funding coming into
Hmm.
the application. Is there a minimum investment amount that the project would need before the IDC would consider investing with them?
Look, I think just a bit of background as to why we want other funders to come in the first place. How we work as a DFI, Development Finance Institute, is we aren't meant to be the only answer into an industry. We try and say that here we come with a pool of money, and we try and crowd in other funders thereafter. So it's an important concept for us to be seeing other funders coming in, because that then gives us veracity that this is something here that the market actually wants to fund. So that in a nutshell is why we kind of look for other kinds of funding, also to de-risk our projects.
Hmm.
As a rule of thumb, if we aren't writing checks for more than half of the project, I think we're in a safe space. We can push a bit higher. Again, it's project dependent, and our committees can insist on something slightly lower. Again, project dependent. But I think as a rule of thumb, up to half of the project size.
That was one of the questions, was what is the maximum proportion you guys would consider? But I think there was quite a few questions concerning ownership and IP and
Mm,
ownership of the project in general. Um, Especially in a space where there's other co-funding happening. We've spoken to other people
mm.
today who are looking at funding from different studios from around the world. So
Yeah, yeah,
how does co-funding play with international publisher funded
sure.
projects?
Okay, so I think as again, the golden rule is we don't want to own the IP. So if you take nothing else from what I say, I think that's the key element of here. We want you as the producer to own the IP, to monetize the IP, and to make great strides with this IP. Where the question of IP comes into play is we will take it as security in the event of default. So either fraudulent default, or if you as a borrower neglect some of your fiduciary duty back to us, we will resort back to taking some of that IP and then trying to recover some of our funds through the monetization of that IP. But again, I think the principle is we don't want to own the IP, but in the event we have to, we have to.
I see. So one of the other questions was, what does the ownership look like? Would we be part owners of a project that gets funded? Does this
Mm.
include a share of the annuity income once the loan is repaid? So I think
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
definitely this
Mm.
ownership thing that you've kind of explained, but
Mm.
is there a share of the annuity once the loan is repaid?
For that particular question, do you know whether they're asking a share of the annuity, whether the IDC wants a share of the annuity, or whether the actual project sponsor would get a share of the annuity? Would you know?
Uh, I'm not entirely sure. It's
Okay, okay, cool.
it's I think it's from the IDC perspective. Do you?
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll answer all round over there. So how we again how we look at funding in this space is that the golden rule: we don't want to be the major owner of a business as well. So we don't want to be the majority shareholder in an entity. We'd always like to be a minority shareholder in that entity, for a variety of reasons. It's your project, it's your kind of baby. You own it. We come in with the funding kind of story. What we look at taking though as a kind of return is both a share of the profits. If we are taking an equity stake, so we will take a share of the profits. If we aren't coming in as equity funders, maybe we're coming in with maybe kind of a subordinated debt kind of instrument. We'll just look at taking our return, which might be aligned back to a proportion of how much we funded. But again, I think the principle is it's your project. We'd like you, as far as possible, to be owning as much of the rewards as possible. However, we as a funder would also like to be sharing in the rewards commensurate with the kind of risk that we are taking.
That obviously makes a bit of sense. When is a case which I think might happen quite often, especially as studios become bigger and hopefully more successful. When a studio has a plan for multiple titles, do you have a funding review for each title, or is there a funding for the studio as a whole?
Yeah, look, I think we'd like to look at that on a studio basis. So we'd like a studio to come to us and say, we've got a basket of titles. Help us fund us as a studio, as opposed to title by title. It's a far safer way of funding. It's a far more prudent way of funding as well. You're taking a view on a basket rather than just a single event. So I think that's the ideal we'd like to work towards. So if there are entrepreneurs and developers out there who've got a basket of titles that you'd like to come and produce or show to us, then I think that works best.
One thing I was wondering, when you were taking us through the steps of the application process, you have all the various levels that kind of have to be passed. Is there assistance with that process, in the sense of, does an applicant maybe get a bit of feedback to say, well, you're missing some things, go and get this information, go and sort out this plan, and then come back to us? Or is it very much I hand in my application and the whole thumbs?
And you hold thumbs, huh? You let the universe do its thing.
Just throwing it out there and hoping for the best.
Yeah, no. So look, we work with a series of account managers. So I'm an account manager within my team, and I get handed a set of accounts to then walk through the process from cradle to grave. And that basically means that once you come through, and provided your business case makes sense, we'll work with you to get you through the process and get you funded at the end of the day. It's in our benefit as account managers to be working on deals which are worth our time in the sense that they will eventually go through, and they are structured properly and those sorts of things. And how it eventually works, for those who might not be too familiar with with finance or finance in a corporate finance kind of space. We take those transactions up, your applications up, and we need to sit in front of a panel of 10, 12 internal and external credit committee members. These are our senior execs within the company and a couple of senior external individuals. And they grill us on your application as if we are the applicant. So, we have to know like your grandmother's name and, to that kind of level of detail where we can answer everything in your business as if it's our business. So it's in our interest to, walk this journey with you and be in a position where we can answer as best when we eventually take your paper up.
So you as Bhavinesh, almost, if you do believe in the studio, you have to advocate to us, to the higher ups in the IDC.
100%. Yeah, the word you use there is spot on. Advocator. That's it.
Which feels scary for you because you have to trust that. You have to know that. So I suppose that's what it's so intense, right? Because you have to know that this is a good.
I think that's the thing, and I think what I'd like, if nothing else, I'd like listeners to take this away that you have commercial banks on the one scale, and the commercial banks are in essence notice deposit taking institutions. So I'll get my salary deposit into my XYZ bank, and on the back of those deposits that they collect, they then go and on lend onto businesses and those sorts of things. Now, the fact that they have such a wide base and such cheap lending allows them to borrow or to lend then at a pretty competitive rate. We don't have the luxury of doing being a notice deposit taking institute. We go out and we raise our capital on the international markets, and it's for that reason that we need to be very sure when we lend to clients that we are lending to a good client. The repercussions back to us as transactors, as deal makers, and as the institution as a whole, when an investment fails, is pretty large. So we take our role pretty seriously. We are custodian of a national interest. So it's always in our national prerogative to be lending properly.
Something that's come through now from James. Once a studio has been funded, how much time generally do they have to complete the project and pay back what's owed?
Yeah. So in terms of completing project, each deal is project specific. So I mean, if you've given us a timeline to say that it's going to be completed within 2 years and then sold off to the market and recouped within 2 years, firstly, in our due diligence, we'll try and test whether those timelines actually make sense or not. If we believe in those timelines, then we'll structure your payment facilities accordingly. Let's just say, however, you go and 18 months into your 24-month production timeline, you hit a snag and you're thrown out by an additional 6 months. You simply inform us. We will work with you. We'll still be in contact with you, and we then kind of stretch your payment facilities accordingly.
Because, like you're saying, you're not a bank. You really do want this investment to be successful, because it's important for the ongoing success of the IDC for these projects that you believe in to be successful.
Yeah, 100%, man. And these things aren't, these, especially in the gaming space, we aren't dealing with like vanilla type of lending, like maybe like a construction project where you've got like defined terms. The foundations goes up in this kind of timeline. The walls, they've been doing it so often, and there's only so much leeway for error. You're dealing in a space where it's a pretty nascent space. There's a lot of things which can change. It doesn't mean that we'll allow you to just go and have free reign on the project. We'll hold you to certain standards. I mean, if you find that you're messing around, you will be held accountable for it. But if it's reasonable, we'll be reasonable.
I think that one of the last questions, which probably are going around everyone's head at the moment, are there any studios that are close to being funded at the moment, or have you funded studios in the past? How far along in this grand experiment are we?
So we started with this journey about a year back, and it's been a lot of investigation, a lot of like sitting in seminars like this, chatting to people, asking for good projects to come knocking on our door. I have to be quite honest, there's only been a handful, and probably 3 or 4, which have approached us, which seem decent enough for funding. And of those, there were really only 2, which we were quite interested in. And in principle, we had quite a bit of buy-in from our executives to say that we can go ahead and fund these. Both of those haven't been completed. Not for reasons specific to the IDC, but more issues more on the applicant side. They've either secured additional funding or the project is moving in a slightly different direction. Again, I think from our end, I think the message we want to put out to the market is we're serious about this. We really are. We see that there's a golden opportunity here. But what we want is good projects to come to us. Really, think about this carefully. And if you really think you've got something which is a winner, please come and chat to us. My email address, my contact address, and that is out there. Always glad to chat to people about different ideas and whatnot. But if you've got something grand to chat about, please reach out.
A couple of people have asked if they can get access to the slides of your presentation. There was a lot of information there about the process. Is there any space, maybe if they send you an email, if they contact you, can they get access to those?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, they can. Yeah, just
Okay.
I think they can find my contact details on this website. Or yeah, I'm sure within Africa Games Week, yeah, you'd be able to find my contact details. We're very responsive, so you'll get a reply back shortly once you email us.
Zane asked a question. We are running out of time, so if you have any more questions, please pop them into the comment section as soon as you can. Zane's question is there a preliminary my mouth after a day of talking? Is there is there an early approval stage? I'm going to do it that way, which a studio could use as leverage for obtaining co-funding?
Yeah. Good question, Zane. So typically what we do is we have like a 3-stage process. The first stage is called a basic assessment. So you come in, you have a chat to us, and within 2 weeks or not, we put together a quick paper to say, high level, this is Zane, this is his project, this is his kind of deal. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? We don't dig into too much of details. There's not much work required on your end. Assuming we get a yes from there, we'll ask for a further bit of info. And we then go to a further committee, which is chaired by our CRO and our CFO. At that committee, they, as pretty senior principals within the organization, will give us the go-ahead to basically go on a DD. But at that stage, they can actually tell us, you know what, it makes sense. You can issue this client an indicative non-binding term sheet. Now, you know that non-binding term sheet is going to have our specific terms to say that, you know, we as the IDC are willing to lend XYZ to you as you know, as either in debt or in a form of equity, and our terms are boom 1, 2, 3. So in essence, that's kind of like an early stage kind of, I suppose, some form of approval that you can use to then go and shop around and secure other types of funding.
Fantastic. I think that's all the time we have. There's about 15 minutes left before we go to our next session, which is a very special, different session. Before we do that, Bhavinesh, thank you so much for answering all our questions, for giving us all this information about the IDC. Please contact Bhavinesh. Don't just I mean, I'm sure he's nice to chat to, but specifically about how you can potentially work with the IDC. He is definitely someone that you want to connect with. And as always, like I've been saying for the whole day, use the My Meetings and the random networking functions to connect with other people across Africa Games Week for the next 2 days as well. Bhavinesh, thank you so much. The next session is the Nordic Game Discovery Contest. That's happening in 13 minutes, so hang around and maybe meet some new people. Thanks so much.